Hi, Stephanie.
Hi.
Welcome to our Rules to Thrive podcast.
Happy to be here.
Thank you so much. This is our episode 4. I'm very excited for you to share your journey, but if you don't mind, start with your name and take us through your career journey as where you started, who gave you your first chance, and take us through where you are today.
Sure. Stephanie Glenn. I lead the digital business across North America at Salesforce today. So that's our marketing cloud, commerce, and data cloud business. I've been at Salesforce for 13 years.
Wow.
So I guess even before that, I graduated from college and I sort of grew up at IBM. Mm-hmm. I went through their sales training program, which was a great foundation. Sold mainframes on Wall Street when I was 22. Had a great ride at IBM. Stayed there through my MBA, which I did at NYU in New York City. So I've been in New York a long time.
Amazing.
And then in 2011, I read Mark Benioff's book, Behind the Cloud, which still has so many relevant, pertinent things today, even though it was 13 years ago. Saw sort of the future of cloud and also joining a company with values that really aligned with my own personal values. And so I made the leap to this no-name, unprofitable company. It wasn't no-name in San Francisco, but in New York, it was pretty
new.
It was pretty new. We were in a very small field office.
44th and 3rd.
You got it.
Yep.
You got it. That's when we first overlapped. And it's been an amazing ride since. So I'm sure we'll talk about it, but the things that have kept me at the company so long are sort of having these multiple different chapters. So I've had the opportunity to grow and lead a lot of different businesses, whether it was financial services, in our commercial business, and then helping build out the SMB business on the East Coast, which was so fun. And then I made the move to Marketing Cloud about 6 years ago, which was frankly like joining a new company because our Marketing Cloud business was 9 different acquisitions. And so that's been a really fun journey and led me to today.
Amazing. So take us through it. You landed IBM. You get into client services. So you were on the sales side, right?
Yep. Always on sale. Always in sales.
On the sales side. Amazing. And then after IBM, how do you go out and apply? Where do you land? How do you find kind of how to get into this new, exciting behind the cloud journey with Salesforce?
Yeah. I mean, no surprise. Obviously, it's through networking.
Of course.
I've learned as I've grown my career, I'm really good at dishing this advice and sometimes not as good about taking it myself. So I definitely, you really sort of need to stretch yourself and through just different networks. A friend of mine from high school, her husband was working at Salesforce on the services side. One of my early managers at IBM, his son was working at Salesforce as an AE. So really just lots of conversations.
Yep.
And then kind of honing in, I often tell people, I'm like, it's like applying to college, like pick your major and your minor. You can't go major in 100 different things. And so narrowing that search, I think becomes really important, and then sort of really doubling down on that network. When I came to Salesforce, Goldman Sachs had been my client for many years at IBM. And so I had this opportunity to go cover Citigroup or to help build out the commercial business. And for me, it was this opportunity to just go try something new and do something new. And that's sort of a theme that we'll come back to, but has really paid off in my career, is taking those risks and being willing to go jump to different business units and help go grow and really mold those businesses.
You had so many good nuggets in there. So let's cover and unpack a little bit. So one, I think when people are getting into the industry today, it seems super daunting and applying and what does network mean and networking and asking for help. You made it super simple. It could be as simple as a high school friend. It could be as simple as their relatives, anyone you know who's connected to the company. It doesn't have to be a CEO, CTO at an organization you're applying. So I think that's a huge thing and misconception in the market today.
Totally. I would add one comment to that, which is it's really about personalizing it. The number of LinkedIn messages we all get that are just generic and cut and paste and written by GPT or, name your flavor of AI. So having it really be personal, and it doesn't have to be that you personally know that person, but it's just what is that connection? What research have you done to try and tie that connection?
Let's make it practical, because I literally was just looking at my LinkedIn today and someone message me saying, hey, I have 10 to 15 years of customer success experience. I'd love to chat with you about what I can do.
Probably not the first message you're going to reply to.
And it's hundreds of messages like this versus I had on Friday received a note saying, hey, I know this person you're connected with. I am currently on the market. I'm looking to apply for account management role. I've done account management for the last 5.5 years. I've managed these and these accounts. I'd love to be connected to talk to someone. That I can copy paste and send it to the hiring manager.
Exactly.
So if someone was to do the research and apply, knowing what we know today, what would be your advice? How do we put it into practical terms?
Yeah, I think you laid it out really well, which is how are you personalizing? What are the skills that are transferable? Again, I'm not a huge fan of like, oh, like I know this person, I know that person. So it's less again about like the do I know that person? But let's take I went to NYU for business school. I get a lot of notes from NYU alum, both undergrad and MBA, and the differentiation for the people that I really want to take the time and make sure that I'm just either passing to the right person are the people who've, number one, researched me, said something personal about me, said something personal about the role, not just I'm interested in Salesforce, but what specific roles have you actually researched? Because again, we have 2-3 minutes, and if I can go take that person's resume and go refer them for that specific role, it's going to have a much higher likelihood. So I think the specificity and the relevance of what are their skills, and we've moved to a really skill-based competency structure for hiring, and so I aspire to really use that. But the more people can talk about what translatable skills they have, the better.
Love that advice. I think it's super important to everyone in the market. The second golden nugget you had in there was you decide when you have 2 opportunities in front of you, which is amazing, regardless, in any state of your career, having multiple options. You decide to take on something you haven't done before.
Yeah.
How do you encourage people to look at that? So if they have things in front of them, that the comfort zone versus the uncomfort zone, because obviously you've done so many different roles within Salesforce, which is completely different organizations if you think about it, to get to an executive vice president. So if you were in a decision-making process today saying, I'm taking on a whole new business challenge, or I can go manage something, I know exactly what that would look like, what would be your advice?
Yeah, I would say a couple things. First of all, especially in the early days, it was not sort of the popular choice. It would have been easy at the time to stay in financial services, or then to stay in SMB, or then to, even in marketing cloud, to stay within the verticals that my teams were covering. But I think the stretch moment is to say, okay, what am I going to learn and what can I teach?
Yep.
And so I think for me, the decision criteria is really comes down to those 2 areas. You want to be able to sort of bring the best of your own playbook, and that's what should give you the confidence even when you're making a pivot is, okay, I understand talent at scale. I understand operations at scale. I understand customers at scale. I can go teach those sort of core functions to other people, and I can do it hopefully in a high performance culture environment where also really you care about culture and care about the people. But then, okay, what are the new areas that I'm going to learn? And then, of course, both through the interview process and once you land, being super humble. I mean, there are people in the digital business at Salesforce and they know who they are, that know more about email than I will ever know in my lifetime, right? And so when I joined Marketing Cloud, it was, okay, who are the people that can teach me and have domain expertise in the product areas? And then what can I teach them about sort of operational rigor and running a sales organization?
Yeah, I think that was actually one of the lessons Sarah Varney taught us in our community is, even though you're hired for executive role, director role, or even an IC role, asking questions is the best way to learn.
Yeah.
And I think to your point is when you get into it, no one is expecting you to have an answer to everything. Yeah. And even if you have to make an executive decision, you want to ask as many questions as possible to land and understand what is actually applicable to the team or the business cycle you're trying to run.
Absolutely.
So
it's the nature of what brought so many of us to the go-to-market function is that the nature of any of this is about deep discovery and really asking questions and being naturally curious.
Absolutely. So take us through your journey at Salesforce. So you land as an individual contributor and you decide to do something completely different, right? So take us through it.
Sure.
What happens next and what are the next kind of career evolutions for you?
Yeah. So started as an AE in that commercial business when there were basically two of us in New York, a really good friend of mine, Evans Colleen, who's pending the close of the acquisition, about to come back to Salesforce. So that'll be great. But literally we were the two in New York and we helped build out the commercial teams. It was really fun as an AE. Knew I wanted to move into leadership. And that's when I moved into our financial services business as a New Yorker. Tend to always get pulled back into financial services. I'll call out my very first management job. I was leading an SMB team in financial services, had never done SMB, had never been a leader at Salesforce. And it was like the Wild West. My team's territory was the entire East Coast and all of Canada, just for context.
The dreams people would have right now about that territory.
Exactly. But basically we were all learning on the job. And I think the theme from that team that has very much carried through is that we were all in for the mission. Like everyone on that team was willing to put the work in. ICs and myself as the leader. And we had an epic year. I went to chairman's that year. And so it really paved the way. Number one, for me to open my eyes to, wow, like I don't need to only do enterprise. I don't need to only do SMB, but also just sort of the magic of those teams that you have. So moved through financial services as an RVP. And then that's when I met a guy named Mike Wolf, who is an amazing friend, mentor, sponsor of mine. He just went to go be the CRO at Sprout Social with Ryan Barretto. So lots of fun people that
Fun
are
fact. Sorry, I have to
Go
tell
ahead.
it. How I learned about tech. I'm in my MBA class in Loyola in Chicago. I've been in finance, working for Morgan Stanley, as you do, when you're trying to get into financial services. And I know I'm bored in my job. And I know I need to pass Series 66 to get to the next level. And super random, marketing communications class. I just shared this story with Ryan, he was super shocked that this was actually the pivot in my career. He comes in as a guest speaker, and I was like, what is Salesforce? What is tech?
Right.
Just a super limited exposure. And the way he was so passionate about Salesforce and what he was doing on a day-to-day, and Chicago office was tiny as well as New York then. And this is when I decided that I was going to leave Chicago, go back to San Francisco, and get into tech.
There you go.
And the full circle moment for me was actually, I got an invitation from University of Miami, because I live in Florida now, to come speak to the MBA class.
There you go.
And my schedule was insane. But I said, if Ryan changed my career trajectory to land somewhere I love and have spent the last decade loving and growing in, I have to give back and show that same passion if I can. I don't know if I could do the justice that Ryan did, but I do my best to teach the MBA students of what's possible in the career of tech.
I love that full circle. That's
full
awesome.
Circle.
That's awesome.
Shout out to Ryan.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so back to where we were. Yes. So Mike Wolf. So this is kind of back to the power of the network. Yeah. So I met Mike through a friend, and we met at a kickoff in February. And Mike said to me, "What do you want to do next?" Yeah. And for those that know, Salesforce beginning of the year is February. I'm like, Mike, it's February. Yeah. What do I want to do next? Like, we just started the year.
The whole plan is set. What's happening?
And of course, this was the moment for real, authentic networking, because what Mike and I did the entire year, we met monthly and just bounced ideas off of one another. He needed sort of tentacles on the East Coast. He didn't know financial services. I obviously was learning the SMB business. And so when it was time to interview for the role to go work for Mike as a second line leader in SMB, obviously I competed for the job. I'm always willing to compete. But I had a unique advantage because I had learned and done so much discovery on the business. It was such an organic fit by the time I went and took that role. So back to sort of the tips, the practical tips on networking. It's like building those real, authentic, organic networking relationships. And by the way, when people ask me, oh, will you mentor me? I'm like, you don't even know if you like me.
What does that even mean? What do you want to learn from me?
Like, let's just see if it's a match. And maybe there's one or two things that I can be helpful with, but you don't know if you want that for a long-term mentor. And so I think it's just this opportunity to really find the right match depending on where you are.
Yeah.
Okay, so I go to the SMB business. It was super fun. Favorite parts of that role and those teams is that's where I learned everything at scale. Sort of back to that comment on learning talent at scale, operations at scale, and customer engagement at scale. You have to be super scrappy in the SMB business because transaction volumes are high. You're hiring so many people. We were building out Boston, New York, DC, Atlanta. And so you're really sort of forcing yourself and your playbook to think about, okay, what does it mean to roll out a program? What am I measuring? What does success look like? Do the AEs, does this resonate with the AEs? Are they going to get behind this? Is it actually going to put money in their pocket? Is it going to generate pipe? What are the outcomes that you're seeking? So lots of skills that I learned. We did color war in Central Park. Like I had the entire team over to my house. My kids still talk about it.
Amazing.
And so when I think about high performance teams, like I think back to that time of we were working really hard. We were driving really great results, but we were also having fun while we were doing it. And so it's this balance always of how do you balance sort of authenticity and empathy and accountability. And I really do think it's hard, but I do think that you can do all of those things. Okay, so I just said a ton of things. So
I know there's so much. I have so many questions. Okay, so let's unpack the full career first. And then
totally. Okay, so that's SMB. And then I think that was an inflection point for me. I was having my third kid. I have 3 boys. And just thinking about sort of what did I want next. I met some additional greats, Andy Kofoid, who's now president at Databricks, Ed McDonald, who's the CRO at Asana. And that was the intro to the marketing cloud side of the business. And I remember talking to Andy about it. I'm like, I know nothing about B2C. I've really been a B2B on the B2B side. And Andy said, everyone's a consumer.
Yeah.
Just think about sort of what is that end customer experience. And so that was a big moment of moving to that marketing cloud business and doing a lot of learning about the nature of B2C and how it's different. And we send more email on Black Friday than anybody else, but also then sort of bringing all of those core principles that I had learned through the core Salesforce machine to the marketing cloud team to really focus on how do we integrate those teams better because we all share an account, right? Whether you're an industry focused core seller or whether you're a domain expert in a product area. And so it's been a great journey in Marketing Cloud. I had our comms media and high tech business, did some really fun, big transformational deals, SiriusXM, worked with Meta, lots of really fun, big projects, and then took over leading the Amera business, just headed into this year.
Huge growth, huge trajectory, lots of different business units, lots of learning. Okay. I have so many questions. Let's unpack.
I'm like, should I get some wine?
So first question for you. As you stepped in from an individual contributor to starting to manage and then scaling the team, if we have listeners who are looking to scale and grow and hire well, because you know that the scary part is, yes, you have headcount and you're trying to fill it so quickly, but how do you make sure these are good people? What are some best of your tips that you've seen of carrying authenticity, making sure that your team knows the goal and the end goal and driving towards that? What are some interesting things that you found through your experience?
Yeah. Okay. So I guess I would unpack it 2 ways. So first is if you're an IC and you're aspiring to be a leader, the obvious easy thing to do is to just take on as many team leadership roles as you can, even while you're an AE. So that could look like being an onboarding buddy for someone, running a program. I'm a big big proponent of what program did you run for the team.
Yep.
I think even at 75,000 people, I think the magic happens at the team level. When you walk into an RVP meeting, like a team meeting every Monday, and you're thinking about, what are we going to do this week? How are we going to hold each other accountable? I think Stand and Deliver is an amazing way to really just test yourself. Do I know the corporate pitch?
Yeah.
Am I proficient in agents, right? Can I go build an agent? Can I do just a few things that we're working on at Salesforce right now? But I think it's really like, how do you look at what does your team need, and how even as an IC can you start to think about kind of taking on some of those roles. At the end of the day, as an IC, as an AE, you're go crush your quota.
Yeah.
Like results and the quantitative metrics will always matter. But an old mentor of mine, Tony Rodoni, I'm throwing out lots of legends of Salesforce fame, was, are you getting it done and doing it right? Mm-hmm. And I think those individual contributors, those AEs who really can always get it done and do it right by sharing their knowledge with others are going to be really well positioned. So that's sort of practical advice on the how to start thinking about leadership. We also have a lot of programs now in our own. So if you're in a sort of more structured environment, opting into those programs, it's just a great way to say, I'm raising my hand.
Yes.
I'm focused on this.
I think that's so important. And I see this a lot. And I have a lot of people reaching out to me and saying, well, I'm hitting my numbers and I'm doing all the right things. It's not enough. And managers look for people, and you keep me honest, you have so many people working for you. People that stand out are the ones that raise their hand and nominate themselves to take on more than just delivering their number.
Yeah.
And it also gives them, like you said, it gives you exposure and flexing your muscle to know, can I do this?
Yeah.
Can I get additional people together to work on a project?
And do I want to do it?
Exactly. That's a whole other discussion. Yes.
You're giving up all your autonomy. Like an
Yes.
AE job is one of the most autonomous jobs on the planet.
Yes.
And so I think really when the first question I always ask people when they tell me they want to be a leader, I'm like, why?
Yes. Yes. Well, I'd love to hear your feedback. What would be the essential difference between an individual contributor to a people manager? Like, where do you see the shift?
Yeah, I mean, you basically are losing control and you are losing some of the autonomy that you have. You're only as good as as your people once you're a sales leader. And you definitely need to be there to help them. And you're going to have a wide variety of people on your team, some brand new that you need to handhold, some of your rock stars who expect you to be with them on their big mega deals. And you're really sort of doing this balance of in the business and on the business. Mm-hmm. And so it's just starting to think about, okay, how do I want to lead this team? But also I'm still really responsible for the results of the team.
Absolutely. I think I try to conceptualize it in my head as well, because I've gone back and forth between managing people to being an individual contributor, and you can do both and be a leader. I think that's very important.
100%.
But to me, the way I try to conceptualize it in my head is you're responsible, like you said, for your own fate, your own results, and you're in full control. Where when you start managing people, you're responsible to inspire, remove barriers, and be there when you need them.
Right.
And that's very hard if you are very much used to kind of controlling your fate.
Yeah.
It's not something it's taught in school, not something that it's partially taught in an MBA, but it's theoretical, not practical.
Yep.
Because people you start engaging with and managing have different personalities, preferences to working. So I'd love to hear your advice on how to empower people to do more.
Ooh. It comes down to figuring out what their motivations are, mm-hmm. right? If you can go figure out, because you're going to have an AE who really wants to optimize for their W-2.
Yep.
You're going to have an AE who wants to be a leader immediately.
Yep.
You're going to have someone who wants to go stretch themselves and go to a different part of the business. And so you're going to focus on networking with them.
Yep.
You're going to have someone who, it's going to run the gamut. And so I think once you understand what someone's true motivations are, that's what really allows you to then work with them. And then the last thing I would say, and again, we're really good at Salesforce about sort of trying to put pen to paper on what's your plan, what's your vision, your values, your methods, your obstacles. but it's what is that person's development plan? Have they taken the time to actually write down what they want to accomplish? Because that's what's going to enable the leader to just very quickly be able to help them.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the more specific you are with your leader and yourself of what you want to focus on, I'm guessing in your personal plan, it's learn something new and be impactful in different areas. But I'd love to hear when you decided to move into different roles and different segments, what was your kind of thinking? Was it just, I want to try it, or were you a little bit more deliberate with the decision making?
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely I had a plan.
Mm-hmm. That's why I wanted you to tell us the story. Yeah.
I had a plan, which was obviously, I knew sort of probably early in my life, but early in my career that I wanted to lead big teams and run a business ultimately. And so I think the plan for me was, I'm sure at some point in this, you're going to ask me, what advice I give my younger self. And it's like, I wish I hadn't been in such a rush. But I think one of the things that I was okay with was I was okay with that path being windy, as long as it was helping me get sort of directionally to the ultimate place that I was looking to get to, which was, again, sort of leading a business, close to running a P&L, if you will.
Yep.
And so I think in every sort of move, it was assessing, okay, what am I going to learn? Is the team going to be bigger? Am I going to be stretching myself in new ways? Am I going to be learning new segments? Am I going to be learning new products? Am I going to be interfacing with different people in the company?
Yep.
And so once you sort of go down that decision tree and then you get advice from people, but then you have to take some people's advice and not take some people's advice, because people will give you just a plethora of advice. And so having conviction about, okay, who are the leaders that I'm going to work for? And again, sort of where is this going to get me? Maybe not this immediate job, but thinking sort of two steps ahead.
Yeah, I love that. And I'd love to dig in, because I think the biggest misconception that our listeners love to hear is your LinkedIn, and my LinkedIn always looks like this, right? If you're high performer, super go-getter, but in reality, we go through ebbs and flows, and some things are not always going in our favor. And I'll actually tell you my story, and I'd love to, if you have a story of saying there was a role that I went after and it didn't work out, but it was a dream job at a time, right? Yeah. So I'll give you mine. So I was an individual contributor. I was hitting all my targets, and I really wanted to become a people manager. At the time, we had a new CRO from IBM who kind of promised me the job and then changed his mind. So obviously bruised ego, all of the things that you can think of. So I started looking internally and externally. And one of the roles I still remember was on Salesforce nonprofit side. It was managing partnerships. So for Salesforce Foundation, it was still a separate company at the time. And I was like, this is my dream job. I knew Allison Freihoff, who used to run it as a CRO, and, all the things, as you say, your network, tapping into it, going through the interview, and yes, you compete. And in my case, I did not get it. And that pivoted my career drastically, because then within the next 6 months, I was still highly performing. The IBM CRO left, and the new CRO came in and gave me the path to future of being the team leader. And then within the year, I was global vice president, which is amazing. Yeah. Super fun results. But no one sees that on the LinkedIn story, right? So I'd love to hear, was there any pivotal decisions in your career that did not seem pivotal at the time, but take us through kind of how do you handle it? How do you manage it? And as you said, looks 2 steps ahead.
Yeah, I think I don't have anything at Salesforce where I said, oh, I wish I had gone to this place and I didn't go, or anything like that. Like it really, it sort of worked itself out. I think back to sort of that younger self advice of, not being in such a rush. There were a few roles where I'm like, oh, I should have this title. Mm-hmm. And I was focused on the title. And I think what I, of course, should have been thinking about is what was my skill acquisition? What were the things I was learning? Because the titles caught up,
Yep.
right? That actually wasn't the thing that was, holding me back. I think it was, okay, can I go get into the roles, find success,
Yep.
and then the titles,
Will
come
Yeah.
and work themselves out. So those are probably the, probably biggest lessons learned in it. I also think you're never really going to know, like people just are waiting for that perfect role or that perfect patch or that perfect business segment.
Yeah.
I mean, every business has its amazing qualities and the things that are really hard about it. And I remember when I was moving to Marketing Cloud, because I was moving away from the core kind of CRM team.
Yeah.
People are like, why would you move away from core? And a lot of people have now done that at Salesforce. And the sort of beauty of it is that a bunch of us have been able to go and teach other people who came in through acquisitions just a lot of the sort of core
Yep.
skills and core DNA. And so it worked to be an advantage, but it was definitely a risk at the time, just because not that many people had done it.
Yeah, and I think you paved the way,
Yeah.
right? You show what's possible, you show the playbook, it might evolve, but it's such a skill that you don't see. I think my favorite quote that I love is, every decision that's monumental is only monumental in hindsight.
Yeah.
So I think that journey, and I remember there was almost a negative connotation leaving CRM and going somewhere else.
Yeah.
Because CRM was such the core product.
Yeah.
And if you went anywhere else, you're missing out on the biggest opportunity.
Yeah.
But now it's a whole platform play.
Exactly.
That is a huge opportunity. And I think it's a little bit more practical advice from what you said. It's not bad to get lateral knowledge.
Absolutely not.
And put your ego aside.
Yeah.
I'd have to tell the same thing myself 5-6 years ago. It didn't matter, because eventually the title will come and you actually become more knowledgeable as a leader because you have a breadth of knowledge versus just that one segment.
Yeah.
I think that was key from your story. I have really fun facts. I do my research.
Okay.
Something that you said that I loved is the work-life integration. And you use this quote where it says, live passionately, be all in when it matters most.
Yes.
Take us through what that means in your life.
Yeah, so I did this program called Compete to Create, which was one of these mental toughness coaches. This was Michael Gervais, who's the sports psychologist for the Seahawks.
Yep.
It was an amazing program. And basically the sort of task was, how do you take your core values, which mine are transparency, passion, and excellence, and really sort of distill them into a purpose statement. And it was a pretty emotional exercise, which was surprising, but it's hard to sort of distill that into. And that was how I got to live passionately, be all in when it matters most. And the be all in when it matters most comes back to sort of your comment on work-life integration, is that I have 3 kids. I have this crazy life. I love to travel. I love to ski. I love to play tennis. I love to do all these things. Like, I work all the time. It's like, how do you do all the things?
Yes.
And of course, I mean, we know this, like, gender aside, you cannot do all the things at all times.
Yep.
And so that ruthless prioritization of thinking about, what is the actual thing at that moment that is most important? So on any given Wednesday, it's like, is the thing that's most important taking my son to something at school, or is it being on a plane to San Francisco for a critical meeting?
Yeah.
And in different weeks, those things will be different. Yeah. And unfortunately, they will not always be perfectly aligned because there's only a fixed amount of time. But I think, number one, once I got to a place of having enough confidence, it's not about title. It's not how senior you are. It's really getting to a place where you are confident enough that you can make the right decision for yourself. That just unlocked so much for me, because it really let me start saying, okay, I'm going to have to miss some things at home to go travel for work and vice versa.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really what it came down to. I just don't think there's any work-life balance. I think I've thrown that out the window a long time ago. And I do think it's brought a lot of joy both to my colleagues and to people at work. and to my family that I really have brought them in both directions. And so my kids know a lot about what's going on at Salesforce, and my coworkers know a lot about my family. And that for me, again, was sort of this unlock of, it doesn't make the work go away, and it doesn't make the stress of not being home go away. It just makes it that I can have confidence in the decisions that I'm making at any given point.
It's a lot. And I think it's very hard to do.
Yeah.
Fear of missing out.
Yeah.
One, feeling like you won't be there when an important decision is made.
Totally.
Two, and then being there for your family. So for anyone, how do you make the decision? How do you prioritize? What would be your advice?
I mean, sometimes it's just made for you, right? It's like, if it's something medical, if it's something, if there's just a non-negotiable, the decision's made for you, and you're probably going to just miss something that you really would love to be at. But I think my sort of source of organization is my calendar. And I have an amazing EA. She runs my world. And so we're constantly looking out at my calendar just to say, okay, what's coming up? And what do I have? What can be moved? What can't be moved? It's a finite amount of time. I remember when I was joining a board of a nonprofit, I was really worried about it because I'm like, I don't have time to join a nonprofit board. It's a huge commitment. And what I realized was, okay, some of those things like board meetings are going to happen during working hours because it is a fixed calendar. But I know exactly when my board meetings are, and they're on my calendar. And so I will do as much as humanly possible to avoid being away, to not miss those meetings. So I think if you can get really sort of crisp and organized, obviously having an EA to help you is amazing. But to think about what are the things that are fungible, and then it's color coded for me. So I pretty much know like what I can move and what I can't move.
Amazing. Okay. And then is there any guidance? Because I know you just went to see Taylor Swift in Florida, right?
Yes.
How do you prioritize and make sure you have time for fun?
Some of that happens last minute. So that was the impetus for the Taylor Swift concert. I had friends going, and I literally last minute, I am totally a bandwagon Swiftie. I have jumped on the bandwagon very late, but last minute, I knew I could pull it off. I know my husband is wildly supportive of making sure that I have time for self-care and fun. And so it's like I was able to just squeeze it in. Travel, I mentioned, is a really big passion. And so just planning vacations, it doesn't mean you're not going to have to take a call every once in a while. I do work very hard to try and take at least one truly disconnected vacation a year. I have learned that like even in a work-life integration model, you do need the ability to just really disconnect. And so I prioritize self-care, and that is in the form of just fun girls trips. My kids go away in the summer, so we have more freedom in the summer. And we miss them terribly, but they're just fine at summer camp. And then just making sure that you're squeezing it in when you can.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. That's very, very helpful. I think you can do it all. I think that's the question we always had to.
Just not all at the same time.
Just not at the same time. That's definitely the summary here. But I'd love to go back. You were talking about your mentor, Mike Wolf, who I love. He's amazing. But it seemed to me that he turned from a mentor to a sponsor. So I'd love your advice, because I think you kind of alluded to this in a question that someone asked you, can you mentor me? And it's so broad. For anyone who's looking to create support bench, how do you approach it?
Yeah. So I think to your question, there is true delineation between what a mentor is and what a sponsor is. A sponsor is someone who's advocating for you when you're not in the room. And oftentimes that sponsor can really only authentically come if they've seen your work product.
Absolutely.
So you shouldn't expect that someone's going to sponsor you just because you're good friends or just because you've hung out socially. But if they actually can vouch for your work product, that's where I would lean on sort of how do you get to that point where someone's really going to be advocating for you. And then on the mentor side, I mentioned a little bit earlier, but I think some of it is how do you find someone, dependent on what skills you're trying to acquire or what business you're trying to go into, what can you teach them and what can they teach you? So that reciprocal mentorship is real, especially for once you do get to a level of seniority. Like, I'm desperate to know what people are, what's actually going on with AEs or what's going on in the field. And so I'm a huge office person. I'm the site leader for the New York office, and I go to the office a lot, and I get to just chat with people. And I don't know that it's formal mentor-mentee relationship, but because I'm there and just make time, I really do try and block time to just go get a drink in the social lounge and actually interact in organic, just casual ways. That's where you do a lot of the learning. And so I think that reciprocal mentorship is huge. And then, like, my one thing that I always tell people, because I think people fall short on this, is you don't have to take my advice, but you have to follow up and tell me how it turned out. People do not follow up. The art of the thank you note is not dead. Like, please and thank you. Whether it's an interview or a mentor, like someone spends 30 minutes with you, just send. Does not need to be formal. It can be a text, but just say thank you and show gratitude.
100% agreed. I think there's a lot to unpack, as always. So much goodness in what you're saying. One, it doesn't have to be, can you be my official mentor? It could be a conversation. Two, I think to your point is when you go into that leadership role, you're not as involved in the field and hearing from customers, partners, whatever the roles are actually engaging in the field, right? And that knowledge is key for you as well to make your decision. So I think there's a lot of misconception around, if I'm an individual contributor, I can't help a leader learn something from me. That's not true.
Yeah.
And giving insights from conversations you had with customers, or if you're in marketing and you're seeing these trends in the field, anything could be knowledge.
Yeah.
And the second piece to what you said is take advantage and have the conversation. But I think the big thing that I've seen also is when you do ask for that time is being very specific what guidance you're looking for.
Yeah.
And sending that in advance, I think, is even better, because that gives you time to think about what would your advice be, even if they don't take it. But if they want your advice and your knowledge, I would say that's the piece that I think I haven't seen done well is if you want the guidance, tell me exactly what you're looking for advice, so that when we are in that meeting, if it's 15 minutes, 30 minutes, we can go right into it.
Yeah. No, it's being organized and running it like a deal, right?
Yes. So take us through, if a mentee was looking to go from a mentorship relationship to a sponsor relationship, what would you encourage them to do?
I'll come back to that word organic. If we're organically working on a deal, one of the best AEs I've seen in recent years closed the SiriusXM deal that I had mentioned earlier. David Runkle, he's amazing, and like we've gotten to know each other through real work, and I would advocate for him any day because I've seen the work product. And so I think really leaning on people where they can vouch for your work and they know and they've seen how you are, whether it's internal or external, I think is the best way to do it. And I think again, you'll know when you have that relationship with someone, whether they're super senior or they're your direct manager, whether they're in your management chain or not. You'll know when you have sort of tangible work product that they've seen, and then just even if it's not, oh, can you go advocate for me for a specific thing, but it's then really sort of using that person to bounce those ideas off of. I think that's where you sort of blend the lines between mentorship and sponsorship.
For sure. And I think some of the most creative work for me came from those discussions of just saying, I'm thinking of building this. I'll give an example. I've managed a lot of SIs and marketplace partners, but I've never built a resale motion. Yeah. So just balancing and saying, hey, I'm thinking about this. It seems to make sense. It's coming into our world. Can you talk me through it? And I think just planting that seed for myself as well, and giving the confidence to the person that I'm actually interested, I'll explore, I'm asking the right questions, and this could be a potential revenue generation stream.
Yeah, totally.
That's the same thing, from a seller as well. You could say, I'm working on this deal. This is how I'm thinking of positioning it. And sometimes it could be magical conversation that leads to your doubling the opportunity because someone who's been in your seat can give you guidance from deals they've seen in their past.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. Thank you. I have a lot more. I feel like we're all over the place, but I love it. The biggest thing I'd love for you to cover, can you share your 3 daily habits that contribute to your most professional growth?
Okay, 3 daily habits. Well, number one, I already told you I'm a big calendar person.
Yes.
So I think the opportunity to just look a little bit farther out. And some people, their source of organization is Slack or email or whatever the case may be, or being in Salesforce or being in Monday. But for me, it is definitely still my calendar. And that's what gives me the outlook of, okay, what am I going to do today, tomorrow, and then sort of farther out. So that's definitely one. The second is sort of a blend of personal, professional, but back to that compete to create. One of the commitments I made coming out of that program was that I was going to leave my phone completely out of my bedroom.
Okay.
So I do not sleep with my phone in my room. I highly recommend it. The first thing that everyone says is like, but it's my alarm clock. And what my response is I will buy you an $8 alarm clock on Amazon.
They exist.
That just the clearing of your head when you are going to bed and you're first waking up is so important. And then the third is some type of self-care. So, during the thick of the pandemic, I did something on the Peloton app every single day, mostly on the bike, but anything on the app. And so it's whatever that form is, but those are just 3 things that get me kind of oriented to every day is I guess they're in reverse order, but disconnecting before I go to bed, understanding my calendar and the prioritization, and then some type of self-care.
So Peloton, who's your favorite instructor?
I am a big Emma Lovewell person.
Okay.
I'm excited for her to come back from mat leave.
Love that.
Yeah, so.
Okay. I love Cody and Allie.
Yeah.
They're also amazing. Okay. How do you define what a dream career looks like?
The thing that has given me sort of most gratitude and that I just continue to come back to is the best jobs I've had and the dream career is just all of the people that I've had the opportunity to impact. And I've now had, and this is me just, quintessentially in middle age, I guess. But I've now had lots of people who've sort of worked for me different times. And I've seen people get promoted internally, externally, leave, come back. And so when you see sort of these people who've done almost what you've done, but seen them on the journey and had the opportunity to impact people's professional and personal lives, just that's the dream.
Yeah, no, I think that's huge. I love that. That was probably the first time someone answered about someone else. I love that. Thank you, Stephanie. What is the most powerful career advice you've ever received, and how did it change your trajectory?
Advice I got of just not being in such a rush. And now, so many years into my career, I feel that because it is a long career, which when you're 22 or 25 or 30, you can't imagine. But now I look back and I'm like, wow, it is really, really a marathon and not a sprint. And so I think once I truly internalized that advice, people gave me that advice plenty because I was ambitious, and I am not dispelling, people should definitively be ambitious. But again, I think it's sort of how do you separate that ambition from, okay, I've got to get to the next thing. And so just sitting in that thing and figuring out what you can learn from each experience, that was a big unlock for me.
I think that's really important, not rushing and just really understanding the full impact of the role you're in.
Yeah.
That can help you in the future.
And in tech, it's gotten more important because as these businesses have scaled, as Salesforce has gotten bigger, we've set, guidelines, and people aren't going to move necessarily. Your journey may not be as fast, quote unquote, as someone else's. I didn't move into leadership until I was in my 30s. And so when someone comes to me like, I want to go be a BDR manager, and there's nothing wrong with being BDR managers. We need lots of amazing BDR managers. But, when they're just a few years into their sales career, the question I always ask is, okay, if you were to wait a few more years and continue to sell and be able to just have more exposure to different kinds of deals and industries and sizes and verticals and everything, like think about what impact you can have and how much more you can teach at the point you go into leadership. And this really did prove out for me, is because I waited and, I was in IC at IBM the whole time. Because I waited, I then did move more quickly when I made the move to leadership.
You had the years of experience, the experience of different customers, their journeys.
Yeah, different segments, different verticals, all of that.
Because as a BDR manager, you're also advising people how to navigate a difficult or interesting conversation. And if you didn't have that exposure, you can't use the same playbook you've had for a fairly short period of time.
Totally.
Having that longer exposure can definitely help. I love that. Research indicate that women often experience greater salary increases when they switch jobs versus staying with the same employer. And on average, there was a study by Zippia where they found that they receive about 6.4% growth when changing jobs, which is actually fun because surpassing men by 5.5, which is the first time I've ever heard us surpassing. But it does suggest that the job mobility can have more efficiency in negotiating higher salary.
Okay.
But in your experience, you've navigated from an individual contributor all the way to executive vice president.
Yep.
So help us understand negotiation tactics. So when you're up for a promotion internally, how do you negotiate your value? Because that's not the same thing as... Yeah. So let's go through it. What are some of your tactics?
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right, which is when you're internal, it's less about trying to negotiate specific dollars, right? I think that the piece that I've always been focused on is how am I really advocating for myself to get to the right roles? And then you obviously you have benchmarks. I think women have gotten better but are not perfect about being open and having sort of transparent conversations to understand what their market worth is. And so I definitely advocate for knowing your worth. And then I think it's somewhat... And this is going to sound like I don't advocate for myself, which I do, definitively do, but it's somewhat about sort of knowing what the full picture looks like. Are you just like advocating and like pushing hard for cash? Are you pushing, do you want equity if you're in a smaller company? Do you want stock? And so I think just really understanding what that full picture looks like is really, really important. So I think use your friends, have trusted conversations, understand your market worth. And then again, don't settle, but also recognize that full picture of what the total sort of package is going to be really important.
So additionally, we kind of covered a few things.
Yeah.
So you say salary is probably the first thing people look at as young professionals getting into the role because cash is important post-college. Yeah. Beyond salary, there's bonuses.
Yeah.
Beyond bonuses, you said equity if it's a public company or stock options if it's a smaller.
Yep.
Is there anything else?
We talk about this a lot for sales professionals, but people will look at, what's my base salary, right? And it's like really understanding your comp plan is actually the most critical piece, because you should, if you're taking a sales job just for the base, you're probably taking the wrong job. And so understanding what the true earning potential of that full compensation package looks like, especially because for any level of sellers, you're going to be on a leveraged plan.
Do you have any advice if someone came in and they understood that they're not on the equal parity as the rest of the team? How do they negotiate to get to the same level? Or do they just, what would be your advice?
Yeah, I mean, we've done a ton of work at Salesforce about pay equity. And so I think that you should feel very comfortable. Obviously, again, if you're not making your numbers and you're not, contributing value to the company, it's a slightly different conversation. But I think through transparent conversations with your leadership and with HR, you should feel very, very convicted. I just actually went through, my compliance training. It's like, there's an anti-retaliatory policy. So you should feel comfortable if there really is some discrepancy. I'm not a huge proponent of, people on teams talking about their compensation with one another because I just don't think it's necessarily appropriate. Lots of things go into the mix when you're thinking about, what someone's being offered. But I think in general, it's, we should live in a world, and I aspire to live in a world where people are being paid and it becomes a meritocracy of making the money that they should be making.
Absolutely. And I'd love to go back a little bit to one of the things you talked about, which was nominating yourself to own a project and seeing if you are actually willing and can do more than what you're doing in your job currently.
Yeah.
How do you, so let's say you have someone, I see, individual contributor on your team coming to say, I want to see what I can start contributing outside of my day-to-day. How do you recommend they ask the question as of what's important to you? What are some additional projects they can work on? How do you frame that? So,
yeah, I think it's less, and this kind of goes back to when someone's emailing you or sending you a message on LinkedIn about, can you help me find a job? That's not the thing that's going to get someone's attention. I think when someone comes to you with an idea, here's something I've seen, here's a gap, here's what I've noticed, here's something with our pricing and packaging that's off, here's something with our roadmap. We're headed towards an agentic world, and what is that going to look like in Marketing Cloud? And I want to go work with products, like coming with those ideas. And that's where, we pride ourselves on sort of being the 75,000 person startup still, is that people are very free to bring ideas. And, we use Slack, obviously, because we own Slack, but we use Slack as a very sort of like open, transparent place for people to share ideas. And that's really where the best project work comes from.
Okay, so someone nominates themselves for a project and it's really impactful. Let's say they're building something around pricing and packaging. They'll impact the price. How do you recommend they advocate for the results or for their ownership of the project? Is it something they speak to their manager? Is it a wider forum? What do you think is the biggest impact to driving something that they're working on?
Yeah, I think it's, basically you're making a proposal. So it's, here, I've identified this need. Here's how I think we could go solve it. And here's the program that I'm recommending that we go roll out. So a big one that I often recommend is when we have first line leaders who want to make that jump to second line. And I talked about sort of that you're learning everything at scale when you move to second line leadership. And so very often when I interview people for second line or third line roles, I'm looking at, okay, what programs have you actually rolled out beyond the scope of your immediate team? Mm-hmm. So let's say it was a pipe gen program. So I would say, like, what's the need? You've identified the need. Are you going to be looking beyond just your own team? How are you going to roll it out? What are the KPIs? How are you going to measure the success? How are you going to package it up? How are you going to start with the why? Like, there's so many things that go into building that program. And so I think that's an opportunity to ask for help if you've never done it before. But I think you absolutely should be having that conversation with your manager, with the leaders around you. If you've identified a need in the business, everyone's going to be all ears to how to go solve that.
100%. I think the biggest piece to what you're saying is it's not just about the idea, it's about execution.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, and I see this a lot, we go out for drinks and everyone has something to complain about. And everyone has this amazing idea of how to make something better. But the true leadership shows up in a person who comes up with the idea, gets the buy-in, and executes.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest piece.
Let's go back to the art of the thank you note is not dead. The follow-up is just so, so critical.
Well, maybe we can cover of how to get better at speaking, because I don't think that's or how to nominate yourself to get started, right? That's a big one. And
yeah, sure. I set out for public speaking as a goal. I'm not shy. I knew that I could do it. But it was very intentional. I remember I did this program, Max Altschuler, who's now doing VC stuff, did this big event in New York called Sales Machine several years ago. And I raised my hands. And it sort of spawned, I did a Dreamforce keynote. I did the Marketing Cloud keynote at Connections this year. So it's kind of a combination of Salesforce events and then non-Salesforce events. The biggest thing that people are always like, oh, you're perfect. You could just wing it. Nobody can wing it. No one. Especially now leading a big organization and having to do product demos when you're doing keynotes. Like, you cannot wing that. You have to know the ins and outs. My husband could tell you like the entire Marketing Cloud demo at this point. But I think it's being really intentional that number one, that you want to do public speaking. Panels are a great way to get started because it can be casual, it can be conversational, it can be, sort of picking up on what other people are asking. You don't have to be a domain expert because a lot of people shy away from like, well, I'm not the expert, right? I don't sit in product, but I did give a product demo because I asked for a lot of help, had a lot of reverse mentorship for people to make sure that I could get prepared. And then I think you literally cannot prepare enough when it comes to public speaking. The last piece is that when you actually get into it, even in a podcast setting, then you sort of have to let it go and just be your authentic self and be super transparent, because that's what will make it sort of more authentically you and hopefully more fun.
And then in your role, you have so many people in your org. How do you maintain authenticity? You can't have a personal relationship with every single person as much as I know you want to.
Yeah.
How do you maintain that authenticity?
Yeah, I think you use the tech. I put out Slack videos a lot. There's a team of mine that's going to be in Austin tomorrow, and I just couldn't be there.
Yeah.
I have multiple events in New York this week, and I couldn't be there. And I put together a video this morning, unprompted. No one asked me to do it, and they're going to play it tomorrow morning when the meeting starts. So I think there's very bite-sized, in an ADD culture, there are very bite-sized ways. And then back to the office culture, wherever I travel, I really make it a point. Can I get a breakfast together? Can we go to a workout class? Can we do just some combination of in-office and social? Because that's how you get to know people. And going on the road with people is a really good way to get to know them, but obviously that doesn't scale either. And so I think just finding ways to connect either through short videos or all team calls or things like that. It's just a really good way to try and keep the connectivity.
I love that. I think you also have a very unique skill because a lot of Salesforce growth was initially out of San Francisco. And you being remote office, which is now not so remote, but there's a unique skill of being top of mind and advocating for your brand for the next opportunities, which you were referring to. So for anyone who is not in HQ and wants to be a part of big initiatives and new things that company is rolling out, what is your advice? Being authentic, but also nominating yourself for opportunities.
Yeah, I used being in New York 100% to my advantage at Salesforce, because every time there was a world tour that was coming to town, we always had very great customers here. We just didn't always have the gravitational pull of all the meetings being in here. Mm-hmm. So whenever there were customer events, I always used that as an opportunity to just make sure that I was meeting with executives, staying top of mind that way. Again, raising my hand for speaking opportunities, whether it was recruiting or, just other forums. And then when I go to HQ, I am very, very intentional of just making sure that I'm finding time with people who are based in San Francisco to just, again, stay top of mind and to bring sort of the best of what's happening outside of headquarters. Most of our marketing teams still sit in San Francisco. And so just, finding ways to make sure that we're connecting with that team. It's hard when you're the only person remote. I think in a very hybrid world now, that's just gotten a lot easier because people are dialing in from lots of locations.
You said at some point you wanted to become a part of a board and do more things that are inspiring you that are not day-to-day work. How would you go about finding what's important, and how do you go about nominating yourself for these board positions? What has been some of the tactical, practical advice that you'd love to share with us?
I'm on a nonprofit board today, and that came through volunteering through Salesforce. And so I met the organization, Project Sunshine. Shout out to Project Sunshine. Amazing organization that's improving the lives of pediatric patients and their families in and out of hospital settings. But I met them through volunteering at Salesforce. So like we were talking about finding your next job, it's like you can find these moments in many different places, but then started volunteering with them and then met their staff and then met the board. And that's how it came to be organic. I'm on the tech advisory board for the tech MBA at NYU. And I went back to campus to help recruit. So that was how I got back involved at NYU. I hadn't been on campus in a long time. And so I think it's these moments of you have to figure out what are the points at which you want those opportunities. And then, okay, how do you sort of weave organically? What are some of the connection points that you have or things that you're passionate about? You can't do them all at once.
Yeah.
So you have to pick your moments.
I love that everything a part of our conversation today, you mentioned all the opportunities in your life have been already from people you knew, whether it was initially getting into the career that you built your dream career and continue redefining what that means. These were people already in your network. So you don't have to go build a whole new world to get into what you want. Just looking around yourself, I think that was the first big takeaway I have from you is saying, look who's around you and look who you can learn from. And then maybe in a moment of time, it'll create a whole new opportunity for you. And then you said in terms of what's important from a passion perspective, it could be contributing to an MBA program you finished, or it could be a nonprofit that you volunteered that now you become a board member. So it could be all within the vicinity of what you do today. It's just knowing what's important to you and what you're passionate about to get started.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I love seeing you. I love seeing your career. I've been watching your career since 2013. So it's been incredible. And you're an incredible speaker. And thank you for joining us for Rules to Thrive.
Of course. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.